Sam Bankman-Fried pleaded not guilty to federal fraud charges Tuesday. He could face up to 115 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office is launching an FTX task force to recover assets of victims from the crypto exchange's collapse. Yahoo Finance's David Hollerith and Alexis Keenan join us now with the latest. And Alexis has been covering sort of the legal ins and outs of this. David, you were in the courtroom yesterday, so I actually want to start with you. Just tell us what it was like there. What was Sam Bankman-Fried's vibe, for example, as you were watching?
Yeah, I think the best way to explain it is if you've never been a part of a criminal proceeding, which I was fairly new to it too at the time, is that there's actually a lot of rapport between the defense and the Justice Department, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that there is a little bit of this defense team in particular are former members of attorneys for the United States. So there's a little bit of there's a clear understanding there's some negotiations that are happening outside of the courts, and that could happen and that could continue to happen until the trial, which obviously is set for October 2nd. So all that being said, SBF seemed to be in higher spirits than one would expect, and maybe that's because this arraignment hearing was somewhat, it was sort of obvious what would happen at that point.
Right.
And there's more time. I mean, I think as far as an October 2nd trial dates, he's probably pretty happy about that. But, I was not I did not see what I expected to be someone who was, in the throes of having to deal with what he's dealt with.
Wow. And so, Alexis, I mean, even though this was just the arraignment hearing, what steps take place next within this broader proceeding now?
So the case will go through a discovery process, and that means that both sides will get an opportunity to work up their cases. So in that time, there will also be potential evidence that will continue to come out. We've already heard a lot because we've heard FTX's management testify before Congress. So that's really unusual in a criminal case like this, especially this kind of scope, to have heard all that already. But there's a couple other things that happened in court yesterday that I think we should point out. One is that the Justice Department, the prosecutors in the Southern District, they made a request to amend Sam Bankman-Fried's bond. And what they wanted is to bar him from accessing or transferring any more FTX funds. So that's a new condition that was put on. The attorneys also slipping in seemingly an allegation saying that he had helped foreign regulators transfer FTX assets that are being sought by the U.S. bankruptcy and the U.S. management. So for now, the judge also granted a request by Sam Bankman-Fried's attorneys, and that is a request that came in a letter to seal the names of two of his guarantors on that $250 million bond. So right now, the judge said, we will consider that to be under seal for the moment, so those names are not going to be released. However, there has already been a filing that has come from the press saying the public has a right to know who these people are because this is a financial fraud and we need to know where the money's going.
And speaking of where the money's going, this task force, David, that is now started up. I mean, we saw this after Madoff, right? The long process of trying to claw back some of that money, to find some of that money. What is this process going to look like?
Totally. So the Justice Department, or the Manhattan, Damian Williams' office has sort of said yesterday that they've assembled this task force. And we don't have a clear idea of how big it will be at this point, but we can tell that there's a lot to do. I mean, just as recently as last week, there was theft of cryptocurrency from Alameda, one of Alameda's wallets. And obviously this came up in court, and it was a huge issue for whether or not SBF was a part of it. And while that hasn't been proven to be true, people need to figure out what's going on. And this is the kind of thing that has happened continually since the case has started, or since FTX has filed for bankruptcy. So there's that issue. Then there's this whole issue of market manipulation that might not even have anything to do with FTX bankruptcy assets, but still could have affected cryptocurrency markets. So it's quite wide-ranging in terms of what is on the table now that they're getting these high volumes of information and data.
Well, there's also the question of SBF's donations, right? There's been calls for various politicians and political groups to give them back. But who do you give them to? I guess they would give them to an entity like this, maybe. I mean, you don't give them back to him. Clearly, you would give them to the people who have lost money, right?
Yeah, I mean, Alexis, you might have a better idea, but I feel like it would go to the bankruptcy estate.
That would be my guess, is that they would ask for it to be returned to the estate. But then you have the added problem of how is the bankruptcy going to handle customer funds? That's been a problem in other cryptocurrency bankruptcy with Cred and Voyager. And so where those customers of FTX will fall on the creditor hierarchy, that's a big question. They have a much better chance in the case of FTX than they did with Voyager and Cred. They may be up higher on that hierarchy, but that remains to be seen. But I would guess that they would be asking for those funds to be returned to the bankruptcy estate.
Full team coverage. Alexis, Keenan, David Hollerith, thanks so much.